The ACN podcast is made possible thanks to the generosity of our listeners and sponsors, including the Agile Alliance. As a nonprofit membership organization, the Agile Alliance is an excellent resource to help you along your Agile journey. To learn more about the Agile Alliance and our other sponsors, as well as how you can become a sponsor or supporter of our show, please visit acnpodcast.org for more information. And thank you for your support. Good morning and good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Agile Community Network. My name is Ray Arell. I am one of the hosts of this get-together that we do monthly. This is currently episode 102. We've been doing this for about 8 years, getting together once a month and sharing perspectives around the community and understanding different topics that affect the Agile, specifically as an Agilist, a person who's learning about Agile, or we're working with an Agile team. This is a place where we can share ideas and thoughts about different things that are going on. Today, we're going to be talking about this perception that people have about Agilists not knowing how to talk to the C-suite. I do want to point out that we are a sponsored show. Agile Alliance, Cicada Organizational Agility, Engine for Change, and New Agility are the supporting corporate members that help to bring on the show. They help us pay our bills, and also in kind, they come in and they participate with giving us time basically for free, which is great. We thank everyone who is supporting the show and everyone who's become a member of New Agility. New Agility is the company that produces the show. It is a member-driven organization. It revolves around our ability to bring the show on a monthly basis, pay for the podcasting systems and other stuff. And I want to thank everyone who's made a contribution for this. If you want to support us, go to acnpodcast.org and you can sign up there. You can either make a donation or become a supporting member. I'm joined monthly by a full cast of characters. Today, we're a little bit thinner. Shauna, Diana, Jorg, Sheila Eckhart, Sheila McGrath, April, and Hendrik join us mostly every month. We got vacations going on right now, but the perspectives that are shared here are people who've been doing Agile for a long period of time. Each of these people have a different side that they look at. For example, Hendrik is a manager in a very large company. So he's got that perspective. Jorg brings in the view of Agile in his company. And then some of us who are consultants see a broader spectrum of Agile and how it looks out in the wild. They all bring in a good perspective. And then, of course, you. And the way that you participate is raising your hand and joining the conversation. We spin off some questions and you can give your perspective and thoughts around it. So today's topic, Dave Snowden, if you guys know him, he's the guy who authored the Cynefin framework. He's big in complexity. And he, not long back, I think it was probably about 2 to 3 weeks back, he posted, most Agilists don't know how to talk to the C-suite. Talk to the executives. And I found that interesting. Having been in senior management, my Agile journey started while I was in management, and I spent a lot of time with the C-suite with an Intel corporation and talking that language. So one of the benefits for myself was coming into Agile later in my life and management career. I had a good understanding about what management wanted, what they talk about, and what keeps them up at night. As we go 20 years into Agile, I still find across different companies a huge number of misconceptions about Agile. And with Snowden coming up and saying that we don't know how to talk to the C-suite, these misconceptions, when you talk to the C-suite that are still around this far into the adoption curve of Agile, I think that does kind of contribute to the fact that maybe we're not communicating that well. I'm referring to things like Agile means no planning, no governance, it's the Wild West, no documentation, paired programming will drive up costs because now you've got 2 people programming at the same time. We need to mandate a common framework for whatever reason. These types of things are very prevalent today in our environment. And I think that's partly because either we're not joining the conversations, we're not being invited to the conversations, or we're having problems communicating the ideas. From my own perspective, I've been successful in the past, and I'd love to hear the ways that you communicate to your C-suites. I never bury stuff into Agile language. I think that sometimes when we have too much of our words, that kind of takes away from exactly what we're trying to do, which is get business outcomes with Agile. When somebody says, what does that mean from an outcome perspective? Does that mean we were able to deliver faster? Was it at lower cost? How did that translate into business value for us as an organization? We have so much data in Agile teams. We have the voice of the customer for doing something like Scrum, and we're having demo meetings with our customers. We have so much customer insight that we can bring into the conversation. And the data-drivenness, is it actually having an impact on the decisions being made at the C-suite level? Have you ever spent time with any of your executives and asked them what keeps them up at night? What is their priorities? What are they being measured by? And do we help that? Do we help to meet and put to rest sleepless nights of an executive, or are we somehow not giving clear enough information for them? So with that, the questions today are, do you feel that we have a communication gap with the C-suite? Maybe my perspective is one of a limited scope, and there might be some really good companies out there that have a better relationship. I'd love to hear those stories from you. Also, if you feel this is the case, then why do you think it is? What is root cause analysis for this? And lastly, what could be done to close the gaps? If someone has a great suggestion about how you might have gotten past these types of roadblocks, how did you do it? Sheila McGrath, do you want to take a stab first at this?
The first thing I think about is, do you even have access to the C-suite? Or is it going through someone else? It depends on how the organization is organized. If you're in a PMO type organization where it's outside and reports directly up to the CEO, then maybe you have direct access. But in a lot of cases, the Agile coach, the Scrum Master, those types of roles are within IT or within a business unit that works closely with IT. And they're several layers away from being able to talk directly to the C-suite. So it's really hard to have open communication if you don't have a channel to communicate at all. The next thing is, if you're making enhancements but not really doing anything brand new, people are usually tolerant of not knowing exactly what day you're going to implement a minor change. But if you're rolling out a brand new product line, with Agile, people want to get it when it's ready and prioritize what you can develop. The problem is you have to interface with other systems. Sales needs to be ready. Customer service needs to be ready. There may be financial accounting still focused on waterfall that you need to interface with. Usually I needed to translate back and forth. Everything was being done Agile, but all the reporting was focused on waterfall. I was working on something else where everything was being done waterfall, but all the reporting was more Agile. So in either case, I had to translate back and forth, and I had to be able to present. We had to give updates regularly where we demoed what we had. It was different formats depending on which project, but we really had to be able to translate between different methodologies. Sometimes people, you mentioned velocity. The one that I think about is things like people will talk about from Lean, the Gemba walk. I have never used that word. Even when I first learned it, I just immediately said, I believe in management by walking around. And then I explained what that meant. Because if you use jargon, you lose them. Sometimes management, especially the C-suite, thinks they know the terminology and throw around the terms, but they don't realize it's a different approach, a different attitude. So it gets lost that way. Problem, I think, is business agility. if the whole business is not focused on trying to be more agile, which I think a lot of businesses are moving in that direction, but if they're still working the way they worked 20 years ago, like before the Agile Manifesto, if that's still the way they're operating and they haven't changed their processes, procedures, policies, and approach, then you have to educate them. You also have to change the way the process works to actually be agile and have the effect you want on the business.
I think one of the things, I had an exposure to a bank in Europe. They had an enormous amount of leverage because of a realization that the C-suite finally came to, which was they weren't a bank as much as that they were an IT organization, because most of the stuff they delivered their services through was through IT. They reframed the fact that they were an IT organization with a banking license. It was a perfect opportunity for the Agile people to have really meaningful conversations, because they were now not in the you're just overhead to the organization. You're actually a strategic member of how we deliver stuff. And I think when you said IT organizations not connected below, this is where the partnerships come involved with, is that you really do need someone to advocate for what you're actually being able to bring to the table, which I think is interesting. Thank you for your perspective. I think you hit on a number of these. Tammy, welcome. Happy Friday.
Thank you very much. Hi, I'm currently in a smaller mid-sized organization, and I have C-suite members who are very much supportive of Agile thinking and practices, except when it comes to giving up control or including team members in estimating and planning. So they'll have an initiative at a C-suite level. They'll say, we need 5 teams involvement, and may bring in their direct reports under the C-suite, talk about the work needed to be done. They come up with this timeline and are surprised because they didn't identify dependencies and they have unrealistic timelines and have to call in teams at the last minute because they didn't realize that their work would be needed. So I'd like to ask this community, conceptually, they get the agile and empowering team, but their actions aren't necessarily matching what they're saying. So in this situation, what advice would you give me?
Jorg or Sheila, did you want to take a first stab at that? I have an opinion, but I'm not sure of it.
I can give my opinion. And the first thing is, changing your own behavior is always a challenge because you need to do it repeatedly. If they're exposed to other people expecting other behavior, then the learned behavior will probably win because it's much easier to repeat, especially in stressful situations. And I've once worked for a manager who in those situations was reflective enough to walk out of the room. As soon as he wanted to take control, he left the room, which made some people really suspicious because he didn't explain what was happening. That was the big thing to really make the organization appreciate what he was doing. If you can have the discussion of saying what you're doing is giving this message, what you're saying is a different message. Why are you behaving that way? Can you explain it? Can we help you behave in a different way? Can we use a trigger to change something? That would be a very valuable conversation. Maybe they are not even aware of what people see in their behavior and think they're doing something different. I would approach this from the appreciative side and say, I want to work with you as a human being. There's something where we can develop and move it. And if they feel uncomfortable with something they believe should be done, but it feels wrong, they need to explore why it might be an experience they had before. The more they can pinpoint it and make this wrong into something more tangible, the more easy it is to deal with it. Because if you see, like, I'm getting afraid if I'm not in control, this is why I'm stepping out, because I want to give control and I can only do it by removing myself from the scene. That is quite a different behavior from starting to take control.
Thank you. And before maybe Diana or Ray gives their input, I have asked why. And it comes down to meetings are expensive and we have too many people in meetings. So when they cut out people, they're cutting out the doers of the work. And it's brought up in retrospectives and postmortems. And they say, oh, yeah, you're right. We didn't do that. And next time, same thing happens, is they cut out the participants that are doing the work rather than stepping away themselves. So maybe that can give a different perspective as Diane and Ray suggest advice.
Yeah, I mean, what I find is a couple different things. And this is, again, talking to the C-suite in particular. The first question I always ask is the date that you're giving us the deadline? The deadline meaning, think of that word literally. The absolute last day, if we don't get it out there, we're going to miss some window. Some opportunity is just going to go away. Contrast that by example, Intel had market windows where if it didn't get done by that particular date, it would not get into the store by Christmas because there was like manufacturing behind it that you needed to do. And so we found a lot of our dates were being driven by the market windows. And then the real discussion came to what flexibility do we have in scope? If we've got a fixed timeline, we can't just throw more people, you get the mythical man month problem. You need to say, these are the must-have features, and these are the nice-to-haves. And there's always a debate on that ordinal list we create in Scrum, which is, what is the highest one, and where's that line where it's like it's a shippable product? And those are the discussions I typically have with leaders, which is, okay, you have these 26 features. If the top 5 get done, do we have a viable product? Or do they all need to be done? In the very beginning, one of the things I like about some of the processes we have, I can pretty much tell you within 3 sprints if we're scrumming or using Kanban and burning at a certain rate, I can pretty much tell that we're going to hit that or not within the first 3 cycles. I know the data is telling me we're going to be late. And if we've got 26 cycles and we're 3 in, I have enough time to have real meaningful discussions with leadership to say that we need more people, we need to reduce scope, we need to have those debates. As far as the meeting situation is concerned, everyone's in too many meetings. We used to use the rapid decision process. Do I have the right stakeholders in the room? If you're not the right stakeholder, do something else. If you need to be there, sometimes invite yourself because you're the data provider or there's a proxy carrying your data. I would really call out the effective meeting process, making sure you have the right people in the room. And then the last component of this, and we did this at Intel, we had to train managers about how these processes work so they knew who to bring in to those meetings rather than to bring in the wrong people. That's how I met Jorg. Originally, I was jet setting around training close to 5,000 managers in the processes. And that helped a lot too, because that helped the language to get better.
If I may, to add to the meetings, there are a few things I've seen that are effective to get attention and effectiveness into the meeting. The first one is make sure you start with the right mindset. If you're talking about meeting a schedule and getting things done, you just want to move through the meeting. If you're in a creative meeting, looking at the time too much is hurtful. And then the problem is, where do people come from? If I'm coming from coding and running my test and then I'm in a creative meeting, it might take me up to 15 minutes to switch my mindset. Until then, I'm just into how do I finish the meeting? I'm completely useless, frustrated, and it feels like it's not helping at all. If I'm not switching to the mode of the meeting, I'm probably wasting a lot of time. One good thing, I think April mentioned a few calls before, get anything off your mind that you're currently thinking. Just write it down so you can pick up the piece of paper after the meeting and go from there. because then you're really in the topic. And that's what I'm seeing with C-suites very often. They are not in the topic. They're in their train of thought. The meeting is about them getting their stuff off their head instead of listening to the people and helping the people. That means they're probably the first ones to talk, while they probably should be the first ones to listen. And a really good thing to do, one of my colleagues brought up, we have signs in every physical meeting. We can do it in virtuals if you have the camera on, just saying, move on. Because if I'm running the meeting and I'm interested in a topic and I'm talking to 3 guys while 5 others are sitting and waiting for us to finish, this is a damn waste of time. But I will never notice because I'm involved, I'm interested. So I won't see it. And if they give me a sign, because most people are too patient to barge in, they give me a silent sign and I will stop and be reminded that I'm wasting people's time.
Well, what's interesting too, in the effective meeting concept, and this was a leadership thing we adopted a long time back, is tell me the 15 minutes I need to be there. Don't have me there the entire hour. Sheila, go ahead.
One thing that struck me as we were talking is that when you're talking to the C-suite, you need to look at the overall strategy. You need to be looking at the product and program roadmap, which may involve multiple projects, multiple divisions. And you need to look at what the timeframes are that all the other divisions need. So that's something I would do early on to know, is this even achievable in the time frame that we're proposing, even if we can be ready? Can everybody else be ready? And is this a direction that the company really wants to go and dedicate that many resources to? I know I've worked on things where we said, well, we think there were like 12 pieces, and we put it on the board as different implementations that would happen sequentially based on known dependencies. And these are things that C-suite people usually can understand. But as we went, we'd keep uncovering more things to have a viable product that we can produce and market. Even as a pilot, we're going to have to do these things. We may beta test. We may not be ready to roll it out right away. And we may need to revise. And I've been on projects where we had to revise the hardware, the physical product that needed to be changed because there were things that made it unattractive that we hadn't realized until we put it into people's hands. All of those things need to be considered and talked about. It's all those moving pieces. And the only way to do it is from a business canvas or a roadmap, something at a much higher level than we typically think of when we're talking about Agile. Because usually from the perspective of the C-suite, we're down in the weeds when you're talking about an Agile team.
I don't disagree with any of that. Let's bring in some more people to the conversation. Let's see. Just A Shegold.
Hi. I think that the best way we need to be thinking about this is how we are talking about transformation versus the transition. In Agile, we look at things as the long-term time frame. We're changing cultures with that. Executives, they're looking at a much shorter time frame. They're looking at next quarter, next business cycle. You can't do the massive changes from a standardized sort of tailoristic scientific management that most organizations function in 6-12 months. You need 18 months minimum to start even seeing the basic changes. So when we have these consulting organizations that come in, say, we're going to do a massive change in a year, the executives don't see a massive change. There's the start of a change, but it's not there. They're going to get disillusioned. They're going to say, you're not delivering on the promise that we have. I think part of the concern I've seen whenever I've interacted with executive suites is that they want that change. And I have to be like, I can give you that, but in 2, 3, 4 times the expected change time frame. Honestly, I don't know how you do that when the expectation is we're going to do this and in 6 weeks, we're going to see a change, when in 6 weeks, I'm just getting people to think maybe there might be a different way to approach this.
A good observation. Is it senior management causing the misconception? You said also consultants coming in over promising.
I think it's the idea that change can happen in a short period of time, and then you will see an impact. I personally haven't seen an impact without a massive amount of time, 2-3 years to start embodying some of the values that make organizations who focus solely within those agile values successful. When you have that momentum behind them, even in industry leaders who have been working in that standardized, more traditional model, it's a huge cultural shift. The idea that we're going to be driven by quality and value rather than specific dates, rather than these very static concepts. It takes a lot of time to change that base models within an individual. And that's not something I would ever ask anyone to wake up and just be like, I'm going to change the way that I think about how value is taken as a concept.
How do you walk people through that process? I'm curious, what is your approach of getting people to, as you said, 18 months versus a year? What do you walk people through? How do you get them there?
I'm smiling because it's much more like, how do you get anyone to anywhere? You do the small changes, you offer them hints, you give them a guide to follow. You're talking about how do we develop a human rather than develop a system. It's that social sciences, it's that idea of human development rather than systems development. I don't have that answer. I don't think anyone does.
I think that's one of the reasons why when someone says, well, how long is it going to take? I typically give the answer of it depends.
How long does it take someone to stop being dependent on illicit substances?
Exactly. And plus, I would always say, how long did it take us to get to this point now? Someone said, it took us years to get to this dysfunctional point in our company. It might take us years to dig ourselves out. But again, you brought in the baby steps and taking small nudges. I think that's a very good point. Sheila, your hand still up, or do you want to
It's
add
back
something?
up.
Oh,
I was listening to what Mr. Scheingold was saying about transformation, and I think that's one of the major misses we usually have with the C-suite, because that word makes people think that it's finite. So it's one of the key discussions that needs to be happening. It's a changing landscape. Your competitive advantages are going to change. The strategy is going to change. The model that works now as far as being agile is not something finite, because every time a team reforms, every time there's a new member, you have to regroup the team. Every time you need to bring in other teams to work with each other, that's another change. It's a way to manage change, but it's not finite. It's a journey, not a destination. I think that's something management really doesn't get because the word sounds finite.
no, I agree with that. Thank you for that. Pamela, what do you have?
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Going back to the question about having too many meetings, we recently had a retrospective regarding that. Too many meetings, ineffective meetings. So the first thing we do, we want to make sure we have the right audience, right? If it's a decision-making meeting, your audience should consist of those who are making decisions or who can make a decision. So having a type of meeting there is really important to make sure you have the right audience there to ensure that we do have the flow of value. Value is based on what the customer sees as valuable. What solution will we be delivering at the end of an iteration or a sprint? Regarding the C-suite, we have to understand at that level, they're forecasting out. They're preparing for future budgets. So having an estimation of how long it's going to take to deliver a feature or capabilities is important to them. Even though we're agile, we should be nimble. We have to go in there letting them know that, these are just estimates. Because if the market changes and we have to pivot, then that's what we're going to do. Therefore, the forecast that we provided may shift, but to our competitive advantage. So we have to remember when talking to those at the C-suite, we have to understand what is of interest to them. Even though we're agile, we can provide that information. We can provide the swags. We can provide the wish to help prioritize our backlog so we can be productive, deliver the flow of value, so we can make sure we're operating as limiting interruptions to stopgaps. We have to make sure during our backlog refinement sessions, we are resolving those dependencies before we commit to those stories during our PI planning sessions. Again, optimizing the flow of value. So there's certain things that we can do. Because when I started out in Agile, I've always heard we can't estimate, we can't give them a date. We level set expectations and say this is only an estimate. Because as our team gets closer to the work, there may be some things unfolding that they have not thought about. It's going to be an estimate. Expectations, unforeseen problems, we have to level set with them. I think as long as we're transparent and providing input to their roadmap, they will appreciate it. As long as we're collaborating with them, attending those meetings, those weekly meetings, and if you're not, someone on your Agile team is meeting with them. And they should be depending on the Scrum Masters to keep their fingers on the pulse to see if there's going to be any deviation from the plan. So we can quickly communicate that to senior leadership and they're not caught off guard. There are certain things we can do to assist the C-suite, and we don't have to use Agile terminology. We can use layman terms so they can relate to what we're saying, and we can show them the value in Agile.
I'm curious, when you're communicating your estimates, do you pretense it with this is my 50% confidence schedule or my 90% confidence schedule? Do you use something like that so they know what your guess is?
So I'm having distractions from my phone ringing in the background. Can you repeat the question?
Well, the question is, when you report the estimates, do you give a confidence level with it or something so that when you're talking to your C-suite, they understand the degree of what, from an accuracy perspective?
Absolutely. We can. That's what we do, right? During PI planning, we do have that confidence vote. We share that with them and we get the confidence of not just the team, but senior level management who's attending those sessions with us. After our planning sessions, it's a 2-day planning session, we have something called the business review. That's when we go over the plans. Is everyone okay with it? Do we need to switch around any resources? Do we need to switch up teams? What do we need to do? If anyone has concerns, what are the concerns? Let's address those concerns. What are the risks? Did we roam the risk? Are we just going to accept that? Because there are some systems that, yes, we do interface with, and they have a maintenance system, and we depend on them. So if there's an issue with their system, guess what? It's going to impact us and our delivery dates. So we are very transparent. We says these are the systems we're dependent on, and they know exactly what that means. But the team's confidence, we all voted a 4 or 5. So that's kind of high confidence level. And then those managers who were on the call with us, they agreed to it as well. So they're going to do everything they can to remove those impediments when we report them up in a timely manner. So the confidence vote, yes, it's not always a 5. It normally is like a 4.5. Our weekly touch-base meetings with them, they know what's going on. We're transparent. And likewise, they let us know what's going on with them. Is there anything that's going to change the plan that has been laid before you? Sometimes they'll say, yes, this is what's happening. That's what we're anticipating. So it's like a two-way street because we're dependent on each other. But I think as long as we're transparent, we're level setting expectation, we're not 100% confident, we're 95% confident that we're going to get there. If we're going to accept these risks, then we accept it as a program. We accept them as an agency.
I love the way that you frame that. Number one, transparency. Everyone should write that down because that's what we're trying to do with Agile. And I think the other thing is risk. Understanding what the risk tolerance is for something. I think a lot of teams don't see that. Sheila, your hand went up. What's up?
I've never given a confidence level, but I would have a list of what's on the critical path, risks, issues, dependencies, action items, questions we haven't answered. When you're talking about things at an enterprise level, sometimes you're looking at bringing in new packages, maybe even creating a new platform, a new department to support an enterprise level product. It can be a fairly extensive list, and you don't necessarily know until you get into it what you're going to encounter. At the C-suite level, if you're saying, well, we can either get this package that's built and modify it slightly for our use, or we can do something that we develop internally. These are two options. There may be more that we have to look at. There may be several different feasibility analysis type things that you have to look at the outset. And then as you go along, you may find more things that you overlooked when you give updates. Sometimes it's just quarterly, but sometimes even when you're doing PI planning on Scaled Agile, you still wind up having to give more frequent updates to management, especially if there are a lot of unknowns or moving parts. So I don't think it can be as cut and dried as being able to give that specific confidence level you initially asked about.
I like that. Jorg, we didn't actually ask you the questions yet.
I think the challenge that agilists have talking to C-suite is the same that experts have in general. They have a special focus, which is often diverting from at least the abstraction level, maybe even from the focus that matters to the C-suite. So what they're touching on isn't fully translating, as Sheila said. And very often they come in with giving a message instead of first listening. And that is already quite challenging because people come to you and say, that is what you should do. I've understood that you have that problem. Can you confirm that I understood you correctly? That would be my solution, my ideas. And I see that benefit, as well as then saying, Agile, why does Agile matter? It's very good to just pick the principles and say, we are not focused enough on the customer, and I'm seeing this from this and this. If we do this, like we do planning and reviews, then we will see that we deliver for the customer. How would you like that? Or you feel your people are not engaged. Maybe you definitely want to do retrospectives, and I'll give you a list of all the small improvements. You don't need to understand them, but the number will astonish you. You can communicate it, meet them where they are at, and as much as possible, don't go in with the philosophy. Go in with first proof of use. It's quite a different thing if you have a team that has improved its performance visibly by a certain thing, and then you get and say, in case you're curious, I can tell you why they are doing better and what might help other teams do, framed against what's really the challenge for the company. I think there is a lot of stuff going through the office of the C-suites, from sales to R&D to operations to marketing to whatever, to customers. Everybody expects full focus, and this will not happen. So you need repeated same messaging about benefits and intentions, and then ask them for their help. It would be helpful for me if you do this, and that's what you're going to get. This often closes the gap. Don't try to get permission or justification. I once had the experience in an organization practicing Scrum. People wanted to slow down slightly every second sprint after the retrospective and do something they found important, but not fully in the flow. They were delivering as predicted, sometimes even faster. Before I joined, they had asked management and they had flat out rejected. And that's not what we're going to do. That's wasting time. And I said, why do we ask permission? Let's do it. And after 3-4 repetitions, you have that vision, you present them the result of the vision and say that you're now in control of a lot more data and what you're going to do with that data. And then they will ask you, how did you manage to do that? Most people who are at that level got there from a position of curiosity and communication. So if you can tell them a story, they will love it. So try to find your story.
Now, the question came up about the meetings and who gets to be brought into a meeting. What's your way of getting invited? What is your approach to get invited to one of these meetings, to be able to even share your story?
Yeah, one thing is definitely picking an opportunity. In my current company, there's yearly presentation of technical developments and stuff. So I ran my software team in introduction in a Scrum-like way to get them started. And I got on stage and presented. Actually, that is what's happening. That's the benefit. A lot of people approach me afterwards and saying, how do you do this? Our managers don't get it. That was my door opener. I just invited myself saying, I have a critical message where we can do a lot of stuff. You need to open up the minds of your managers because people don't believe your managers will improve your company. It wasn't a personal challenge to the CEO. It was an offer of help. So people are asking me how to do it. I'm very willing to do it for everybody. If you are interested, you find this is a benefit and you heard the talk, that's me. I try to get the one-on-one discussion with whatever level I can reach. And if they like what they see, as I'm quite convinced that we're doing good things, I always find somebody who's willing to go that way as well. More interest emerges, and suddenly people come and say, can we talk about this? If the bus starts, you get invited somewhere. If not, continue on the level where you can make an impact. This impact is probably visible. I love to have results speaking for me, or other people who say this is actually good. I've met people reporting highly who asked me to run their meeting and said that's highly effective. You should be doing this as well. So please speak up. Then it's more easy.
Yeah. So I like that perspective. Sheila.
I usually find when I'm talking to senior management that it's best to have questions for them to answer and to get them say, we need you to help us set this. We need you to help get cooperation from this group. Give them a role and also focus on what's immediate, even though we're talking about longer term strategy. I will frame the meeting to say what we need to accomplish today. These are the things we need from you, regardless of whatever methodology you're using. But it definitely works with Agile because a lot of the team were very young and inexperienced and didn't know the corporate culture. We really did need a lot of help from management to make sure that there wasn't infighting between departments. And that's a concrete thing that senior management can take a leadership role and help to make things move along more smoothly and get a resolution. The department you might need cooperation from could be somebody like legal or HR. When you're implementing something to support the business, you really do need to involve everybody and get everybody moving in a similar direction. They may have different specific goals, but they have the general goal to move the business of the company forward.
Pamela's comment on this was the degree of transparency that you use. I guess finding your advocates that you can communicate through becomes important. We're reaching the top of the hour. I want to thank everyone for participating. There are going to be some announcements coming out of New Agility. We're going to be having some monthly classes, about 2-hour and 4-hour classes. We're going to start kicking those back off again. Anything from Agile leadership and some other topics around Agile, some things about business planning and strategic stuff going on. There has been talk about starting another business agility lab, potentially here in Portland. Though that's in the early planning stage, we'll find out fairly shortly whether or not we'll be having one this fall. Again, stay tuned to newagility.com, where you can go there, or you go acnpodcast.org. It goes to the same website. I want to thank everyone for participating today. It's been a great session, and I hope you'll come and join us on July 25th for our next live event for the Agile Community Network. The ACN podcast is for educational and informative use only. If you'd like to know more about the ACN community, please come up to acnpodcast.org and support our show.